The Boys Season 4 has divided the fan base, with a pretty unanimous opinion that The Boys Seasons 1 through 3 have been amazing. Going into Season 4, we knew that this would be the penultimate season of the series. With that, many fans still expected a fast-paced, thrilling story like the show has previously done. With Season 4 wrapped up, it's fair to say this was a season to set up the end, bringing thematic elements to the forefront, heavily dividing the runtime to multiple, emotionally heavy arcs, exploring the psyche of our leads, and much more. To say this was a disappointing season would be a lie, but to say it subverted all expectations would be way more accurate. This video won't be containing any spoilers for The Boys Season 4, and opinions for this season have been all over the place, so let me know all of your thoughts in the comments down below, and over 98% of you guys who watch these videos aren't yet subscribed, so if you do enjoy this video and don't want to miss out on more reviews, hit that button. But don't waste any more time, let's get into it. There's so much to talk about, but I want to start off with the consistently amazing performances throughout not only this season, but the series as a whole. I'm going to talk about a few of the performances because I can't talk about every single one of them individually, but the main hitters, you have Jack Quaid, who just goes through hell and back in this season. Huey as a character might not have had like absurd, I guess, A to Z character growth per se, but he's experienced so much that's led him to, in the final episode, have a completely different state of mind, and it's really encapsulated in the episode itself in just a few pieces of dialogue, which I absolutely loved.
Violence isn't brave, and neither is hating my mom, or A-Train, or anyone. But forgiveness, letting go, a little fucking mercy, that's brave. It's crazy, but it's brave.
Karl Urban as Billy Butcher actually gets to express not just a range of emotion, but a real thematic element to the emotion itself. This idea, and I'll talk about the thematic elements itself later in this video, but this idea of him grasping with death, and we see that theme super present throughout this season with multiple different characters, but just the way that Karl Urban is able to put it on screen is absolutely amazing. There's a scene with Butcher and Ryan within the first 3 episodes of the series where they're playing foosball, and Ryan just asks him, "Are you scared?" And that sequence itself is just absolutely thrilling. And then obviously you have Anthony Starr as Homelander. There's not much to say about Homelander. I will say this season he doesn't necessarily have an A to Z arc, but I don't really have a problem with that. This season is more so about, you know, an overall idea of the plan that's kind of taking us into season 5. Now, to dodge around spoilers, but still talk about the story, I want to talk about some of the stories that did stand out to me. Even though I can't go through every single little story, which there were a lot of in this season, which is one thing I absolutely loved about it, there's some essential story points and just sub-stories that were going on that I absolutely loved and I can't not talk about. The main one is Huey and his family / the passing of his dad, and the way that that evolves throughout the first half of this series is absolutely amazing. Butcher's confrontation with death, as I mentioned before, I think that whole idea does slow down in like the 3/4 mark of the season, but I really like how in the finale it kind of pushes forward while also taking a back seat at the right moments. It's a great way to exemplify the relationship between Butcher and Ryan, and also Ryan and Homelander. There are just amazing moments that come from this subplot itself. And then on top of all of this, Homelander's little midlife crisis, I guess you could say, this whole idea that he's trying to do something new and transform. This obviously includes Newman, his plan to take over the White House, and everything of that sort. I love the way all of that's played out. My only problem with that storyline is that towards the end of the season, specifically in the finale, Sage's inclusion in that storyline feels a little bit forced in, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I enjoy that storyline. I just feel like a little bit of the involvement from newer characters was shoehorned in. And then we have Starlight versus Firecracker, which is mostly prominent within the first like 6 to 5 episodes rather than the super latter half, because Starlight has a completely different problem going on. And her, just like Huey, they were going through the absolute ringer, and Firecracker outs her for getting an abortion and the whole world hates her, and then she goes and beats Firecracker on national television. There is just so much crazy shit happening, and I absolutely love it. It's so entertaining, it's so exciting, but also builds up her character in a way that we haven't really seen since season 1, in my opinion. And the final super notable storyline that I want to talk about, without giving any spoilers away, is Sage and Homelander's power dynamic, because that's one thing that was heavily explored in the finale of the the season, and how Sage, even though she got thrown out by Homelander, still wanted to prove to herself that she could do this and execute this plan. And I think that was an interesting idea. I just think on paper, the writing itself for that specific storyline wasn't tight enough for it to feel worth it. And I have that problem with one other storyline, which I'll mention here in just a second. But I do have to quickly mention the slight critique of filler episodes this season, because I feel like a lot of people thought a lot of this season, especially like the individual pacing moments, felt kind of unnecessary. And in the overall statement, I do disagree with, but I will say I can admit that there is one filler episode, which is the Tech Night episode, but there ain't no party like a Tech Night party. No, but on a serious note, I do think that it was a filler to an extent. But I think there's also, after watching the finale, a lot of essential character moments between Newman, Homelander, and Sage there. I think it truly builds up what kind of character Sage is. And obviously there's that super weird shit with Huey, Tech Knight, Ashley. That's kind of what The Boys is. And for the majority of this season, we haven't gotten that absurdity that we've had in the first 3 seasons. And so when we take a chunk of one of the episodes in the middle of the series, I really don't mind. It's not that big of a deal to me. Anyways, another small little complaint I had about this season, which I still overall do enjoy, was the non-essential character time that was spent this season on just characters that felt like they were going to do something a little bit bigger, and those are notably Sage and Firecracker. I think the main difference between seasons 3 and 4 is the new characters that are introduced. Looking at the main ones, in season 3 it's Soldier Boy, versus in season 4 it's Sage and Firecracker. And I think Sage and Firecracker, the second they were introduced, were super interesting characters, but through kind of like the final quarter of the season, they're not necessarily as entertaining as I wanted. Firecracker kind of becomes this weird fetish thing for Homelander, and Sage gets thrown out and then kind of brought back into the writing in the final episode, which I just wasn't the biggest fan of. But Soldier Boy, even though he was introduced later in season 3, I do think has a great impact because he teeters a line between being a good guy but also being really fucking weird but still on the side of the boys. And then the finale is just absolutely epic and insane with him duking it out with Homelander. We really don't get that with Sage and Firecracker, and I think that's also because just in general, this season is probably the least action heavy out of any of the seasons we've gotten so far. And I'll be ranking all of the seasons here on the channel, so subscribe so you don't miss that. But I still think this season is strong in that the overall writing is absolutely great. I think season 3 and possibly even seasons 1 and 2 had near perfect writing, but I think season 4 is the first season where it's great. It's still great, but that's still a downgrade when the bar is so high. But for my pros of the writing itself, again, I think it balances overall character arcs really, really well. And especially after watching that finale, and maybe I'm still riding the high from it, I think they cap off enough character arcs while also giving us enough to chew on and wait till for the next season. Also, we have Gen V season 2 coming up, and so there's still a lot to do, even though The Boys does end next season. But as for my flaws with this season's writing, I think the pacing overall isn't amazing. I think, again, the middle chunk of this season doesn't have the best pacing in terms of character work, and I think it's because of just the inconsistent storytelling. One example of that is Frenchie. I absolutely love his character work in the first 4 episodes, and in the final episode, it's amazing as well. But those middle parts where he goes to jail, turns himself in, doesn't speak to Kamiko, that just doesn't feel like Frenchie, and it also feels like a complete departure and erasure from what we know is character to be like. And then he comes back like nothing happened and Kamiko doesn't care about it at all. There's just moments that like that where I feel cheated as an audience member. And I understand we're focusing on other story points that, yes, by the finale were obviously more overall important, but I still wanted to know about more of those characters because those are characters we've known since the first few seasons of the series. And what I love so much about Frenchie and what he brings to this season specifically is the thematic heft of this season 4. It's probably my favorite thing about this season, and I think it's why so many other things suffer though, and that's kind of why I'm torn about it. The season is so focused on setting up and starting multiple very heavy character arcs that we do get lost in the setup, and the payoff does come a little bit too late for certain characters. Thematically though, I am very happy that these ideas of the guilt and violence and being numb to things like this and also accepting things like this and accepting death and these things that this show has never really touched on, they go all in season 4, and it works and it doesn't work. Again, there's some pacing problems, but I feel like post season 5, people are going to revisit this season and absolutely love it. This feels like the core, the setup for something amazing coming in season 5, especially after watching that, in my opinion, really, really great finale. Weirdly enough, I think the finale helped this season a lot. I mean, I've already been a big fan of season 4 thus far. I've really enjoyed it week to week, but they wrapped up some storylines, but also added a lot of great ones. And again, I don't want to get into too many spoilers here. I'll be talking vague about ideas, specifically with Homelander's overall plan and that comic panel that we all know. It does feel earned. And it does feel like out of all of these crazy batshit insane things that are happening in the season finale, more than the batshit things that were happening in the beginning of season 4, I feel like it was all earned, and we came to this conclusion where we're seeing character moments, like when Butcher sees Ryan do a specific thing in the season 4 finale and then decides to go to the boys and commit this other action that leads to just absolute chaos. Again, I think the finale's only problem is the end, where Sage feels like she's shoehorned in. And if you've seen the episode, you know, but the way that the boys storyline kind of not wraps up but is set up for the next season is also really damn great. We see a little bit of a connection to Gen V season 2 as well, which obviously the showrunner has said that they're not going to go hand in hand necessarily. You don't have to watch one to understand the other, but this whole world of Vought superheroes kind of coming together and forming this really bad thing for season 5, it is interesting and it is intriguing, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hype as fuck for season 5. But guys, I wrap up my thoughts on The Boys season 5. As you can tell, I absolutely loved it. Let me know all of your thoughts. If you enjoyed it, didn't enjoy it, whatever you think, let me know in the comments down below, and look out for more of The Boys content on the channel all through next year for Gen V season 2 and The Boys season 5. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Peace.